Hello, this is the training session 1.2 on how to use fast formula to personalize the display of data within Applaud. So what we're going to be covering in this session is about 30 minutes long. We'll be covering just general techniques on how to change the data that's coming back on the screen, how to change prompts, very common, how to add new fields, how to remove fields that you don't want, and then other advanced techniques along from that. So let's have a look at a very simple example. Here's the employment details panel. This is something you looked at the end of the last session in the exercises. Okay, so the sort of things you can do with fast formula and Applaud: change these prompts. So if you want to change the way these looks, maybe you want to change department to say organization. Change the data coming back to the field. So let's look at this job one here. Maybe you'd like to strip off the key flex field code VP300, which just says Vice President, or maybe you need to show a completely different field in here, maybe length of service instead of hire date. Might be a different bit of data. How do you do that? Hiding or show fields is pretty straightforward. If you want to sort of hide a field or show a field in the screen, you can also do conditional hiding or showing, like only show a field if someone's a manager or not. Adding in brand new data items. So if each panel can have up to 30 fields. If you want to add new fields in, you can do that. Then we have some additional support for HTML formatting in HTML. Things just simple things like bold, italic, colors, and also it's possible to add graphics in via HTML as well. So use fast formula to do all of those things. Right, okay, so let's go and have a look at the simplest one we have, which is called employment details, and it's easier for me to do this on screen rather than through PowerPoint. So what we're doing at the moment, we're going to look at the formula that defines this view here. Okay, so you can see in here, it's one we looked at on the slide a minute ago, department, job grade, and so on. And there's a cheeky little field right at the end that looks like someone has added in. Okay. So let's go and look at the formula that delivers that. So just recap, the way do we get to formulas? I always look through the registered views menu. It's the quickest way to get through. Guarantee that you're looking at the right formula to change. So always good technique to go straight into your registered views menu and derive the formula from there. So here we are, registered views. I'm going into profile. Going into overview, going into employment details, and here we go, formula name is there. So that's what we found at the end of the last exercise. Okay, now if I tend to use Fast Formula Assistant. This is an HTML based fast formula screen. I'm sure a lot of you have used it, but if you haven't, then I find this one easier to use than the forms. So forms work just as well if you prefer to use the forms of fast formula. So here we are, here's the formula. Nothing unusual about it. Just notice the type. If you are creating your own formula, you do need to have a type of Applaud assignment. That's important. If I look at the details in here. Okay, this is where we get into the interesting stuff. So basically when Employee Center runs and it's rendering a screen, it's going through the parameters on, well, it's going through that menu, the layout menu, and then it's going through each function in the menu. So here we've got a view function that defines this formula. It looks at the formula that powers this particular region. It processes this formula, and based on that formula it displays the data in here. Okay, so when this loads, if I press this refresh button up there, you'll see it loading. What it's doing when it's spinning around like that, it's processing the formula, bringing data back from the database, and then displaying on screen. Doesn't normally take that long, but there we go, it's coming back now. Right, this is a kind of a simple example, and I can get it all on screen there. First of all, there's 7 items on here, and you can see this is really simple. We've just got a set of prompts and data items. So you've got item 1 prompt, item 1 HTML, item 2 prompt, item 2 HTML. And you can see on the screen here that these things marry up. So item 1 prompt is department, item 2 prompt is job, that's defining the prompts down there. In terms of the data coming back, we'll cover data in a lot more detail over the next few sessions, but in this particular example we're just using something simple, we're using Oracle database items. So if you've used Fast Formula before, and particularly if you've done any payroll implementation, you'll be very familiar with what a database item is. You've probably used them many times. But basically these are predefined SQL statements that Oracle have written and delivered to bring back particular assignment data. Okay, so in this particular case, ASG underscore org comes back with that, ASG underscore job comes back with that, and so on. That's all it is. Really, really simple. And you can see on this last one, someone's added in item 7 prompt, new flex field, item 7 HTML. It's just some text. So you're not limited to even data objects. I can write anything in here I like. I could write some information text, for example. I could write in some help text, or I could color it red using some HTML. We'll see that later. But anything you like can be put in there. You are allowed up to 30 of these pairs, okay? So you can have up to item 30 prompt and item 30 HTML. When this gets bigger, you just get a scroll bar down the side to let you scroll up and down. And then at the end, very important, you have to just return in the formula these values that you've set. That basically is returning it back to the UI, is deciding on how to display that information. So a few things here. The order in which you define these or even return them doesn't matter. We always display them in the order item 1, item 2, item 3, item 4. Okay, so that order doesn't matter in terms of the way you write the logic in the Fast Formula. What matters is which one is item 1, push that onto the screen in the first position, and so on. Okay, other things you can use, various to child, to number, to date, all those sorts of things are supported within Fast Formula. I pay particular attention to dates. We always try to format the dates into a format that the customer likes. So in this case we've made it a little bit more readable. This is kind of a typical UK representation of a date. So use two charts, makes the date display a lot nicer. And you can also display messages too. We'll see this coming up soon. But this particular bit of code here is an inbuilt function that we deliver that helps you display, a message onto the screen. Okay, so if you've got variable data to come back or something else, then you can do it via message. Okay, so to add on a new field here is as simple as type in item 8 prompt, item 8 HTML, and type in something in. So it can get more complicated. Let's go start looking at something a little bit more advanced. So Fast Formula functions. So on the example I've just shown you, we've been getting the data out through database items. Now, again, this isn't anything we've introduced. Fast Formula functions is something that Oracle delivers, and very simply, it's a way for you to call a PL SQL function from a Fast Formula. Okay, nothing more than that. The screens on here, if you're not familiar with Fast Formula functions, the screen on here defines or gives you an example of what a Fast Formula function looks at. You basically give it a name. You say whether it's returning a function, a number, a date, or a character. And then you define here the actual procedure or function it's calling. The function it's calling has to be a function. Okay, so in this case we're calling something that we've written called get gross accrual balance. And then you have Fast Formula contexts, which are basically assignment ID and effective date. These are your parameters to your function, and then other function parameters in this particular screen here. So I'm not going to go over Fast Formula functions in the way they're set up and delivered, because it's standard Oracle. If you've done payroll, you'll know how to write these, but you can go to the Oracle user guides if not. But they're very simple. You're literally just defining in the UI a PL SQL function to call. Now, you can call Fast Formula functions from our formulas, and that gives you all sorts of possibilities, because basically if you can get data from the database using PL SQL, you can display it in our UI. Okay, that's a really powerful technique to display any data you like from anywhere within Oracle. It doesn't have to be in HR, as long as it's on a database table somewhere. within the Oracle database, you can show it. Custom tables, fine. All you got to do is write a PL/SQL function. Okay, here's an example of a PL/SQL function that is being called by our fast formula function. So in the previous example, we had a fast formula function that was called getAccrualBalance. We saw that it was calling this PL/SQL function on the database. That's an example of what it looks like. Only really showing you this is just a standard function, nothing funny. But you've got the assignment ID, the effective date going in, and then this accrual plan name, which is a parameter that's passed from the function. Basically, the difference between contexts and parameters, these contexts are kind of pre-baked into the fast formula. When the fast formula runs, it knows what the assignment ID and knows what the effective date is. So you don't have to pass those through. And then these parameters are things that you do have to pass through from the fast formula itself into the function. But other than that, it's just a regular function that you write in a normal way. You must remember that the return of that function must match up with the data type of the fast formula function. Right, this is a bit of an obscure slide at this point, a little bit early in the course, but we deliver a lot of predefined fast formula functions that you are welcome to use as part of your implementation. And this is quite an important one that I outline here because you start to see it quite a lot in the exercises coming up. Basically, one of the big problems around using fast formula in the way that we do is there is a restriction of 255 characters in each item. So I'll just go back a few slides here. Okay, maybe the wrong place actually. Let's go back into the screen where you see the fast formulas here, where you're setting in particular item 7 HTML and passing them back. There's a limit of 255 characters on how much each variable can store, which caused us a bit of a problem when we did our first projects with customers, especially if they had long bits of data in them, and particularly if you started doing HTML formatting for any of these prompts, because if you do HTML formatting, you've got long character strings with the HTML code in it, and that will break the fast formula. You'll get a runtime error. The formula will compile fine, but when you actually run it, you'll get an error on the screen. It can be difficult to diagnose. So the way around that is we have a fast formula function, and I won't go through the details of this, but basically rather than passing the values as a return variable, you can pass it into this function, and the function will handle long strings. So if you see xxasmp set long output around the place, then that's why we've used it. We tend to use it on every bit of data now anyway, just to guard against long data breaking our code unexpectedly. Right, okay, so this is an example where we started to use that fast formula function, and you can start to see the code start to get a little less easy to read, but basically the concepts are the same. So this is an example coming through from the contacts panel. So if I go onto our example system again, so what's interesting about this one, we're looking at the contacts panel now, where we've got name, employee number, email, work number, mobile, pager. Right. What's interesting about phone numbers is you don't know how many phone numbers someone's going to have. They could have one number, they could have two, they could have six, or whatever. So unlike these ones where we've got specified, we know we're always going to show 6 or 7 items, and we can say item 1 value equals this, item 2 value equals this, and so on. With this one, we don't actually know how many items we're going to show. I could look at someone and they might only have one phone number. So not everyone necessarily has a work and a mobile and a pager. Okay, so there's a variety of fields that are coming back, variety of number of fields that are coming back potentially on that one. If you kind of look at how this is working, what we're doing here, we're calling this xxamp long output. We're setting this counter, so current form item equals 1. If you just look at what's being built up here, we're saying item plus 1 equals underscore prompt, and then this xxasmp name is a message. So if I just get a notepad going, make this a little bit easier to understand. So if you imagine that current form item is 1, that's the counter. Counter is 1. So that first item here, when you actually put together that string, what it's looking like is this: item, current form item 1, plus underscore prompt, so it comes out as underscore prompt. XXAS is the application of the message, and then XXAS name is just a message. The item 1 prompt is being passed in as whatever that message name is. I think it's called just name. So basically it's just calling a function called XXAS set long output. It's basically doing this. And then the next one is on the list is XXAS set long output. And then you see item, and then current form item is still 1, and then it's got underscore HTML. So we're on this one here now. And then we're passing in per full name, which is a database item. So per full name. So what that's basically saying is item 1 prompt is name, item 1 HTML is per full name. What this does, it guards against full name having more than 255 characters, which is unusual, but not impossible with some names out there. And then what we're doing is we're putting the counter up by another one. So counter then goes to 2. And then look at the next one in the list. So item 2 underscore prompt. Item 2 prompt. And then again we've got a message here called XXA employee number. So if you look at that message text, it'll be something like employee number. We go to the next line. Item underscore HTML. So XXA set long output again. So this should do item to HTML in capitals, I suppose, if you've been pedantic about it. And then again we've got a message here passing in per emp number, which is the employee number. So all this code is doing, although it looks complicated, it's just in the same sort of thing. It's passing back item 1 prompt, item 1 HTML in pairs. But the interesting thing here is the counter's dynamic. So as you go down, I haven't had to prescribe that item 1 prompt is name or item 1 HTML is full name. It's kind of working out as it goes along what the order is. So this technique is useful when you might have a dynamic order within the panel. Quite advanced techniques. You'll probably end up just cutting and pasting and copying what we've done before, but still useful to know, especially when you come across it in our formula. Now if I go and have a look at that particular example in here, I'll look at the full formula. What's it called? I think it starts like this. Yeah, it's this one here. Okay, as I scroll down here, you're seeing the same sort of stuff that I've just talked about. What's interesting is when I get to the bottom, I don't have to return anything. And the reason I don't have to return anything is I actually don't know how many things I have to return. I might only have 5 fields displayed, I might have 7 because of those phone numbers, they vary. Okay, and this is coping with that. A little bit of interesting information in here. See those mail to and telephone numbers? There's a bit of HTML formatting going on there. Basically it embeds the email address and the telephone number ahead of the display on screen. So for example, that's giving that a link there. So if I click on that link, that will email. Phone one isn't coming up here, but if you actually use this on a mobile device, that HTML formatting means that when you touch that number, you'll actually be ringing that number on the phone if you've got that, if you're looking at the mobile work. But yeah, the URL there to just click an email is just coming from that simple piece of HTML formatting here. Okay, so let's kind of build up a bit of complexity. That's a little bit of a tough part of today's session, probably the hardest bit to get your head around, so don't worry too much if you're a little bit puzzled by that, by this code. Right, this starts to get into more advanced, that very interesting opportunities for you as implementers and consultants. But we have the ability, because we're using fast formula, to conditionally show fields. So this is basically putting some logic into the formula to say if a particular condition is true, then show the field, or alternatively don't show the field. Really useful for customers. We get these requirements quite a lot when customers actually start to see the possibilities of the UI. Very common thing to ask is, can we only show this field if you're a manager looking at an employee's record, that sort of thing. And we'll come on to how you do that, but this is another example for actually real customer examples. In this particular example here, just look at this logic in here. If you can just pick your way through the code, what we're actually showing is just salary. Okay, we're just showing salary information. So there's the prompt, it's salary. On the second bit here, which we're writing a fast formula function to get the salary from Oracle. In this case, we're putting a pound on the front. So this code in here is just showing salary on screen. And actually it's showing salary for this particular customer we work with. It was showing salary within this panel here. Okay, so the requirement from the customer was to show salary on here. Now, they had an interesting setup. This particular customer was a local government, and they had a system where they looked after teachers, teachers teaching in schools. But because of the particular requirements, they actually didn't store salaries for teachers. So they didn't really want the salary field coming up when you were looking at a teacher, but they wanted the salary come up for everybody else. So they asked if that was possible. We said yes. We've got a technique where we can write some logic. We can detect if someone's a teacher or not, and if they're not a teacher, then we show salary. If they are a teacher, then we all show salary. So we wrote a fast formula function called get is someone a teacher. That basically queries the assignment table. There's some flags like the job and the grade that someone was on determine if someone was a teacher or not. So if that formula function runs and returns a yes, that means that they would be a teacher, and you'd skip over this code. But if they're not a teacher, then this code will display the salary on the screen. Really nice little technique to just refine the display of data and only show fields that you need to show based on some conditions that the customer has. This second piece here, similar sort of thing. The requirement here was the customer had particular assignments. All assignments were in a cost center that were held on the normal QFlex place, but some assignments had what was called an override cost center, which was usually just for individual assignments. They wanted to show that on the front screen, but only if someone had one, and that, only like something like 5 or 10% of the employees had an override cost center. So they didn't want to show cost center for absolutely everybody, because that would be irrelevant for 90% of the people you were looking at. So again, similar technique. We wrote a fast formula function. Does someone have an override cost center? Just use a fast formula function to derive that. Write a simple PL/SQL function on the database that will return yes or no. If it's yes, then we display the cost center override field. There's a function down here to actually get that information out. There's the prompt, and if they haven't got override cost center, we don't show anything at all. Okay, just keeps that UI clean, and we don't like a UI that has lots of empty fields all over the place. One of the complaints that Oracle has. So that's a good way of making that display a little bit cleaner using the fast formula processing. Okay, jumping ahead of ourselves a little bit, one of the very, very common requirements is can we see a field if the person is the person's manager or they're the employee? So, but otherwise show it blank. An example here, let's have a look again. So for example on here, I'm looking at my own record. So potentially you could put salary in here, but only I see my salary, or my managers see my salary. But if I look at someone else, like the CEO, you obviously wouldn't want to see their salary there. So have a requirement where some fields are secured, and you have secure fields. So fields that you can only see if you have the correct security permissions to access those fields. So it's subtle, it's slightly different than giving security on these options down the left here, but we're talking about field level security in the menu here. That's possible. We use RBAC for that, and of course we'll be covering RBAC on day 2. We actually ship some sample data out of the box to do this. So rather than trying to explain how this is actually all working in practice, all I say is if you have that requirement, then you can just copy this code that I've got on screen here. We're basically getting the value of the assignment that we're processing, and then we're saying, does the current user have access to their own assignment record? Yes. Or is this the case of a manager looking at a subordinate's assignment record? If that comes back as yes, that basically tells us that it's either the employee or the manager looking at the row, and they've got access to look at this particular bit of information. Okay, so if you have the requirement for only the employee is allowed to see this field against their own profile, or only the manager is allowed to see this field against their own profile, this bit of configuration that I've shown you on screen you can copy, and that should deliver the secure field we're talking about. Some of this will make a little bit more sense when we cover roles-based access control tomorrow, but I find actually it's just easy just to cut and paste this code that we've already delivered and showed on screen, just reuse it when you have that requirement. It's quite a common one. I'd say 2 out of 3 customer implementations we tend to find that requirement comes up. Final one before we go into an exercise, HTML formatting. So but don't be under the illusion you can embed any sort of HTML content in a panel. You can't. But we do support some level of HTML formatting for you to do character returns, bold text, italics, that sort of thing. This is an example on screen here. So if we just pick through this slowly, you can see this is just the normal prompt and HTML pairings that we've had before. Here we've got the prompt is tasks, and here we've got the HTML content. So in this particular scenario, what we had is we had a customer that wanted, they had, I think it was an EIT. So an EIT that had particular tasks that someone had to do. I think it might have been for a business trip or something of that nature. So you book your business trip, and there's 1 to 4 tasks that you'll be achieving as part of that business trip. So it was always mandatory for one business trip to have 1 task, but the task 2, task 3, task 4, they are optional. So we did a little bit of formatting to, rather than have a boring UI where you had a field that says task 1, task 2, task 3, task 4, where task 3 and 4 will often be blank, we did something where we actually combined all the tasks into one field, concatenated with some character returns to break out nicely, and actually displayed that in one single field on screen. So this second one is a very common one. So the requirement here is to show mission dates or business trip dates, and here we're showing the start date and the end date concatenated together with a simple piece of HTML. And when you actually look at how those come up, they look something like this. So it's a much nicer display of data. You know, you can see the common alternative you often see is this task would be broken out into 4 cells. 2 or 3 of them will be blank most of the time. It looks a bit ugly. Same with dates. Often you see start date, end date, and you get screens that have start and end dates all over the place. It gets a bit messy. Much nicer if you can use the configuration techniques like this to break up the display into a nicer format. That makes for better usability, particularly important when you go to mobile, where there's less screen space and you want to try to make the screen usage as efficient as possible. So I'd really encourage you as consultants to not just work on getting the data displaying on screen and then forgetting about it, but actually using some of this advanced formatting technique to make the display look really cool. Right, into an exercise. So this exercise should take you around 15 minutes. You'll be going through some formula on our training system. After the 15 minutes are up, well, take as long as you like. and then I will go through the answers. So I'm going to I would request you to pause the recording, and when you unpause the recording, we'll start off again, and I'll go through the answers to these questions. Okay, so this is exercise on fast formula. Let's go through the answers to this particular exercise. So first of all, find the name of the formula used to display the overview employment details panel. So again, recapping some earlier work we've already been through. So we're looking at the formula behind this panel here. So I'm going to start from first principles, even though this is the example I did in the exercise, in the lecture. I always go from the registered views menu all the way down. Always make sure I'm looking at the right formula. Okay, functional administrator. Okay, here's our registered views. Hopefully by now we know that employment details is on profile. We go to overview, into employment details. And remember, there's the formula name there. So if I take a copy of that, and then we go to fast formula assistant, to name. Right, so that's the name. That's the answer to the first question. Okay, what are the last two fields displayed in the panel, and where's the data sourced from? Okay, so we go into the details, scroll down. The last two fields are here. Well, this one is a database item. So if you really wanted to look at where that was coming from, you could look at the database item. There's a table, I think it's called FF roots or something like that, which contains the SQL statement that Oracle used to find this. And this particular one is a bit of a trick question. There's actually no data source at all. It's hard-coded. Now, I'll just say a little point on database items. We have found that the database items that Oracle ship do have bugs, and usually they're suitable for payroll processing, but when it comes to display of information, particularly around data effective changes, we have had customers report bugs in them. So actually, we don't tend to use them anymore at all. There's nothing stopping you using them, they will work, but when we ship anything new, we avoid the Oracle database items for sure, and we tend to write functions or write database views to get that data out, but it's up to you. Okay, you're tasked with adding the display of a new flex field into this panel. What are the steps you need to do to achieve this? Okay, good, that's a common requirement. So what you would do is you would update this formula, and you would add an extra item on here. So you do itemate prompt equals my second new flex field. You'd write item 8 HTML. And then here you would write either ASG attribute 8, if there was such a database item, I don't know, I'm making it up, or you'd write your own fast formula. Let's call it x6 get attribute 8. Just write a fast formula function yourself to get that out, and then never forget you'd have to go down the bottom here and just tidy it up. Always have to return that data, otherwise it won't show at all. Okay, and there you go. It's as easy as that. So as long as you can write a fast formula function you can get the data out. I think someone has tried that already, but actually not written the function. So we're just going to do a slight bit of tidy up on the formula in this training course. Here we go, take that out, and take that out there, compile it. So what I've done here is I've actually just taken off a field that I didn't want anymore. Item 7 is gone. So next time we go into the screen, we shouldn't see that bit of flex field data anymore. All right, just let that run. What do you think XXAS get message is doing on item 6 prompt, and why do you think it could be useful? So here we have item 6. So I've mentioned that this is a message, and just to prove that, if I click copy that, I'm just going to finish. So we save that formula change. Okay, let's go to the messages screen. Okay, there we go. There is the message, and there's the text. And surprise, surprise, that is what you see on the screen. It looks like my session is timed out. Let me just log in again. Okay, supervisor. Okay, so why is the message useful? Well, there's a number of reasons, but one of the main reasons we use messages, or at least we do when we ship it, you don't have to, but here's the clue. If you put in a different language, if you have multiple languages installed on your database, because we use messages, you can put your translations in for these messages, and we fully support the change of language. So if you were to say have Arabic as a second language, and you put the Arabic translation in for supervisor against that message, when the user were to change their language preference, they would see the Arabic text for supervisor come up, and that would hold true in mobile as well. On the mobile app we also support multiple languages. So often when you go through our code, you'll see that we use messages everywhere. In actual fact, that's one of our design techniques, is that we don't use hard-coded text anywhere unless we can really help it. So in that way we ensure that we always support a translated environment. Okay, find the name of the formula that is used to define the display of basic details in the personal information view. Okay, so this is a more complicated one. So there's a warning there. Anyway, let's firstly look at the screen. So what we're looking at here is the basic details panel, which is showing me basic personal information. Nice little flag showing there. It's quite fun. Let's have a look at the formula that does that. So first of all, how do we find the formula? Well, we have to go to, of course, the registered views menu. You're already bored of this, I can tell. Let's go in and have a look at the registered views menu. That's not the code. Okay, so under personal, under basic details, a little bit more coming up here. There's something else here called the p-edit formula, which we'll come on to soon, and other stuff, but the formula name we're looking for is this one. So that's the name of the formula first of all. Okay, next question. Find a field that is only shown if the worker is a contractor. So this one requires you to start looking through this formula in a little bit more detail. And you start to see there's a little bit more complexity in the formula that's there, which you can pick through in your own time. Some interesting stuff here. You can see some stuff coming in about workflow. We'll talk about that in the next training session. A little bit here about date track. So this is all quite interesting bits and pieces. But as you work your way down, you'll see again it's just the same sort of stuff. We've got these little fast formula functions to display data, and if you are following the train of logic through, you'll see a little section like this. So if current employee is yes, then show employee number. If current MPW flag equals yes, then show MPW number. So the clue was in the contractor comments. Those of you that know your Oracle history well will know that NPW stands for non-payrolled worker, which was the old name Oracle used for contractors before contingent worker functionality came along. So NPW flag indicates that someone is not an employee, they're not on payroll. In other words, they're a contractor. Now, again, you might need a little bit of knowledge about the Oracle database and schema, but employee number and NPW number are separate fields on the table. So if you're an employee, your employee number is on a separate column to the contractor number. So under traditional UI, you'd show both of these. You'd show current employee, you'd show the employee number and the NPW number on the same screen. One would always be blank. We think that's a bit messy. So we only show you the one that's got a value in. So anyone that's a current employee will have an employee number. So if current employee is yes, show employee number. Anyone that's got an MP is a contractor or has that flag set to yes will have an NPW number. They're kind of mandatory for those types. So that kind of logic shows you the correct field for your person type. What do you think the not defaulted statements do? Last question. Here's an example. In fact, let's try and find a better one. There we go, national identifier. So it says, if national identifier was not defaulted, then show that information. So here you probably need a little bit of background on fast formula, but it's important to understand that when you have information that you're working with within a fast formula, each one of those needs to be defaulted, and that's done at this top section of code. Every string is defaulted to a string of your choice. In our case, we use unknown most of the time. Dates are interesting. You always have to default dates, and we usually use 0001, first to the first to the first. What you will find is if you're doing your own configuration that sometimes you will see bad dates coming through UI and they will have 010101, and the reason is that that date isn't set, and when a function, an input isn't set, the formula uses the default to display it. So if you were to just show date of birth that hadn't been set, you'd see 010101 on the screen. Now, one way around that is to use this was not defaulted. So basically that's saying national meaning has a value that's been passed in, then show it. In other words, if it was not defaulted. If it was defaulted, it will take one of these values. So fast formulas, it can detect whether this is being passed in as an input to the formula or if it's been defaulted. If it's defaulted, effectively the employee doesn't have a value for that column, and therefore we wouldn't show it. So another example here, date of birth. I think date of birth is usually populated for most people. So this is saying if date of birth is not defaulted or the underscore P was not defaulted, then show it. So in other words, if it was defaulted, then that person doesn't have date of birth, therefore don't show the date of birth field. You might be asking what the underscore P value is. We'll be coming on to that soon. You might want to know how on earth would this show a country flag in the UI. We'll be coming on to that in a later session as well. Here we have that bit of RBAC stuff at the bottom as well about security, in this case around whether you're allowed to update or delete something. We'll be doing updates and deletes towards the end of this first round of training. So there is a lot to learn there. The best training you can have is actually going through our template formula and trying to understand them yourselves. You'll find you'll do a lot of copying of our logic. So don't you worry, you think there's a lot to learn in that particular section. You can copy a lot of our fast formula, lots of good ideas and techniques that we use. But hopefully that gives you enough information to at least find your way around our setup and start looking at how we're achieving different things. The next session in the training will be a new recording session, and it will cover how to do list views. A very common example of that is our absence history. So the next training session will talk about how to configure those.